If you like my dad's videos, please subscribe to QA Insights channel.
Welcome to Learn Chaos Engineering series. In this episode, we are going to deep dive into Chaos Mesh. As you know, Chaos Mesh is an open source project, comes with Apache 2 license. It's built using Go language. It is a very powerful platform for your Kubernetes environment, and it is a CNCF incubating project. It is powered by CRDs, custom resource definitions, where you define your experiments, and it supports variety of injections. You can check more features in the GitHub repository. Now let us quickly see how you can install. It comes with various flavors. You can install it using your local Kubernetes or cloud. You can install it in your Minikube, Kind, K3s, Micro, K8s. But recommended installation is via Helm. And it defaults to Docker runtime. In case if you're using other runtime, you need to specify in your command line. For example, DigitalOcean or Kubernetes service, it comes with containerd. In case if you're using DigitalOcean, you need to mention the right command. Now let us understand about the high-level architecture of Chaos Mesh. There are three components involved in Chaos Mesh. One is the Chaos dashboard. So this is the component where you create the experiments or workflows, or you can configure some settings so that you can leverage the web UI to interact with your Kubernetes cluster. And we have something called a control manager. So this control manager is a component which is responsible to update the events. So it takes the commands from your Kubernetes server, and then it will pass it to the node or namespace or container, whatever it is. And then we have something called a daemon. So this is the component which is very critical. It's like a CPU of a computer where it will actually do the stuff for you. So this daemon will be running in your nodes, and then it will interact with your pods, or namespace or containers, whatever it is, and then it will do the action. How do you send the event to the backend? So either you can use web UI, so this is called the Chaos dashboard here, or you can use some client, and you can use the kubectl. In this example, we are going to interact everything from the web dashboard. So this web dashboard will interact with your Kubernetes API server. So one important thing to note here is you cannot directly communicate with the Chaos control manager. So this will not work. So all the commands will route it via your Kubernetes API server. And this API server will interact with your control manager here. And control manager will create or delete or update the events for you. And then it will pass the commands to Chaos daemon. So this will be running in every node. And this will take care of your injection. So this is the component where it actually do your fault injections. So this is very high level stuff. Now let us quickly see what experiments we are going to see in the demo. Let us start with installing the Chaos Mesh, and then let us do some pod delete, and then let us inject some HTTP defaults, and then we are going to inject some DNS faults. I already spun up my Kubernetes cluster on AWS EKS. Now let us verify the cluster info using the kubectl cluster-info command, where you can see the Kubernetes control plane and the core DNS, which is up and running on my US East 2 region. The next step is to create a namespace using kubectl create namespace chaos testing. So just let us copy this command and create the namespace. So in this namespace, we are going to install the Chaos Mesh. As you see here, this is the command for the runtime containerd if you are using DigitalOcean. By default, AWS EKS uses the Docker runtime. So I'm going to just copy this command here. We are going to leverage Helm, as I mentioned in the slide. And here, as you see, there are a couple of parameters you have to pay attention. One is the dashboard.create equals true. This command will help you to bring up the web UI for the Chaos Mesh. And if you want to create for the DNS fault, you need to set the DNS server.create equals true. Otherwise, you don't see the option in the web UI. Now let us hit enter. So this will install the Chaos mesh components, Chaos CRDs. So whatever it is required, it will just spin up. Now let us wait for a few moments and then let us validate our Kubernetes cluster. Okay, now as you see, the output is showing that Chaos mesh components are running. Now let me clear my screen, and if you just enter k get CRDs, you can see the CRDs which got installed as a part of the installation. And here you can see AWS Chaos, Azure, DNS, GCP, and there are so many Chaos CRDs are available here. So this will be very helpful to implement the Chaos experiments to your cluster. Now let us deploy a simple Nginx and expose the port so that we can use this Nginx to inject some faults. To create the deployment, I'm going to copy this deployment command, which will use the Nginx image with the replicas 3. And if you hit enter, this will create the deployment and with 3 ports. Next, we are going to expose the Nginx port so that we can access it from the browser. By default, it uses the cluster IP. Now the service Nginx got exposed. Now let us launch the Lens IDE to verify everything is properly set or not. As you see here, this is my EKS cluster, and right now we are in default namespace. So there are 3 ports which is up and running. And if you go to the network and services, here you can see the Nginx. And if you just click, and if you just click on forward, it will open the Nginx homepage. So this is the sample demo application we are going to use to inject some fault. Now let us go back to the Lens IDE and select the Chaos testing namespace. And here, as you see, there is a service running for Chaos daemon, dashboard, mesh controller, and for the DNS server. To launch the Chaos mesh UI, just select the Chaos dashboard, and either you can forward the port or you can create the load balanced URL, or you can access it from the node port IP address. So in this case, I'm going to just forward it and click on start. So this will launch the Chaos mesh UI. So this is the home page. You will get it. So this is where you need to create the token to access the UI and run some experiments. So the instructions already embedded inside the UI itself. So it is pretty simple. Just click on click here to generate. And here you need to mention whether you want to restrict the access to the namespace or you want to create something across a cluster. So in this case, let us go with the cluster scoped. And in the role, there are 2 roles available. One is the viewer and manager. So manager is the role you need because it needs relevant privileges to tamper with your pods, containers, or your nodes. So let us select the manager, and here it will generate the YAML manifest, and you have to just click on copy. Now let us go back to the terminal, and let me just go inside the my gits folder. So just to create the new file rback.yaml, you can give any name and just paste the content here and just write, and let us apply this rback in our cluster. So use k apply -f and rback.yaml and hit enter. So this will create the service account cluster role and cluster role binding. And if you just enter k describe secrets, and then here you will get this account cluster manager and hit enter. So this will give you the token. So you have to just copy this token information to the clipboard, and let us go to the Chaos mesh and just close this and paste in the token text field and give some name, say token here, and click on submit. So this will authenticate yourself and then it will launch the home page. So this is the home page of Chaos mesh, where you can see the experiments count, schedules, workflows, and some tutorial information. And then you can easily access the page from this particular UI, and a timeline. It will show you the graphical representation of your experiments, recent events, total experiment status, etc. So it is kind of a self-explanatory. You can just explore it by yourself. At the top right, you can choose the namespace. So right now we have 5 namespaces. And in the left side, you can see there is a workflows. So workflows is a kind of a combination or collection of your experiments where you can run either parallelly or serially, or you can customize your flow. And schedules, it will display all the scheduled experiments, and experiments will display all the experiments which is running or already executed. So it's kind of a dashboard view here. And events will display the timeline. And archives, whenever you archive your experiments, it will get displayed here. And settings will help you to modify your settings. And also you can see the token information, and then you can enable the debug mode, and then you can change the theme, etc. So in this case, let us just check this particular box, the workflows. Use the next generation of workflow interface. So it's a preview feature where you can drag and drop your experiments to create the workflows. So just to check this box, and let us go to the experiments tab here. Now let us get started with our first experiment. Just click on the new experiment button here. And there are two types of faults you can do in Chaos Mesh. One is Kubernetes cluster, and you can also target your hosts. So in this case, let us go with the Kubernetes experiment type. And once you select, it will display the relevant fault options for the Kubernetes. In this case, our objective is to kill some pods. So just select the pod fault type. Once you select the pod fault, it will again display the sub options for the pods. Right now we have three different types of faults are available for the pod. Pod failure, pod kill, container kill. In this example, we are going to kill some pods, so you have to select the right option. And based on your selection, it will display further options. In this case, we are getting the grace period. So this field is optional. So if you want to give some grace period, you can give. So let us give 10 seconds, and then let us click on submit. And next is you need to fill your experiment info. So this is where you define your blast radius. So you have to target which namespace you are going to execute your experiment. So in this case, default. Once you select the namespace selector, it will automatically filter out the remaining option for the label. So in this case, we have two labels for the default namespace. One is an Nginx and pod template. In our example, we are going to kill the Nginx pod. So just select the app Nginx. And at the bottom, you can see there are various options, whether you want to kill everything or random one or fixed number. So in this case, let us go with the random one. And you have to select again a preview of pods. So which pods you need to select for the to inject the fault. So this is where you control your blast radius. So let us select all the 3 pods so that Chaos Mesh can pick up random one here. And in the metadata section, you have to give some name. So in this case, let us give say my first fault. And then if you click on more options, you can again enter the metadata. For example, in this case, let us go with default here, and you can give some labels, annotations, etc. And here, as you see, the run. So this option is disabled because we are going to kill the pod immediately. So that we are not going to specify any duration here. That is why these options are disabled. Now, if you hit submit, it will just collapse that options, and it will display the final steps. So now let us click on submit. So once you click on submit, as you see here, the experiment already completed. So it is pretty quick. And then if you go inside, you can see first fault successfully updated the resource. Now if you go to your lens IDE, and here as you see 8 seconds or 10 seconds ago, this particular pod got killed. So this event happened from Chaos Mesh because we configured random pod to be killed immediately. So as you see, it successfully injected the fault. And if you have your observability dashboard, you can see there should be some quick drop in the response time or whatever it is. You can just observe, and then you can take the next steps to optimize. So it's pretty quick. Basically, you don't see the degradation immediately, but sometimes if you're running so many pods, if CPU is busy, memory is busy, then recreating the pod might take some time. Or if the container is not available, the registry is not available for some reason, again it takes some time to spin up the pod. So at the time you will see some elevation in the response time. But this is a simple example, so it is pretty quick, but our experiment is successful. So based on hypothesis, you can define your verdict. So this is our first experiment. Now let us go to the next experiment, which is DNS fault. So again, follow the directives, click on new experiment here, and click on DNS fault under the Kubernetes option. And in this case, let us go with the error. And we are going to create some DNS faults. So we need to enter the pattern, the URL basically. So let us go with say qainsights.com and hit enter, and github.com, and then say bing.com. So whichever URL you are trying to access, or whichever URL the pod is trying to access, we are going to inject some DNS fault. And just keep entering all the patterns, and again you can optionally enter the container names. Click on submit, and again follow the experiment info. So in this case, let us target our Nginx again, and let us say give DNS fault, and then you can mention the duration. So in this case, let us go with 2 minutes, and select the blast radius, and click on submit, and click on submit. So now what we can do, let us go to the terminal. Let us validate the DNS fault injection. Just type kubectl get pod, which will display this, and let us go inside this pod, kubectl execute interactive, and we have to give the Nginx pod name. So in this case, let us go with the first pod, and then we are going to launch the shell. So now if you enter curl-i and say https github.com, so it will not launch the page because we are injecting the DNS fault. So it is not able to solve the host. Similarly, if you enter curl-i https qainsights.com, so this also will not work. And similarly, https bing.com, so this also will not work. But if you enter https say google.com, you can see the output. Similarly, you can see curl-i https say yahoo.com, you can see http to 301. So whatever the URLs you entered, it will not be able to access from this pod. Similarly, if you go to other pod also, it will not work because we selected all the pods. So this is how you create the DNS faults for your pods or for your containers, so that you can validate the failures. So this is one of the example where Chaos Mesh is pretty quick in injecting the faults. So now let me just exit from this container, so the pod, and let us go back to the browser, and it is still running. And here also you can see the events, and in the right side you can see the definition. You can download this YAML so that you can use it for your future executions. Okay, now let us see the third experiment. Somehow the HTTP fault and the network delay is not working as expected. I already reported the issues to the team. Instead, let us see about the JVM fault. For the JVM fault, I have spun up one simple demo Hello World application. So let us go to the Lens IDE, and here you can see Hello World. And if you see the log information, every second it will print the line number, and it will print the text Hello World. So now we are going to do some JVM chaos. Now let us head back to our Chaos Mesh and select the JVM fault. And here we are going to select the return. And here in these options, we are going to specify the value, say at the line number 999, and the class should be main, and the method is getNum. And port number, we can just remove this and click on submit, and select the default namespace selectors, and then just leave the label selector as is. What we can do is we can just uncheck the Nginx, because we are going to inject only to this hello world, and let us give some name JVM delay or JVM return, and then let us execute for 2 minutes. So now let us hit submit and submit. So now this will inject the particular return value. So now if you go back to the Lens IDE, as you see here, it is displaying the return exception. So basically in the line number 9999, it will just print the hello world, and then it will execute this rule, and then it will just return the return exception. Now if you keep scrolling up, as you see here, after 307 we started the chaos experiment. So after that it is injected the particular fault here. So using this you can also do the JVM related faults for your Java applications. That's it guys from my side. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. Have a good day.
If you like my dad's videos, please subscribe to QA Insights channel.